The music that takes you places. And now, workday wisdom from Big 102.1. Never let your job distract you. From wasting your day watching adorable cat videos. Oh, look at Fluffy playing the keyboard. Or in your man cave with your smart speaker.
Hey everybody, I am Nick Marzock with Full Compass, and we are so privileged to be joined today by the Emmy-nominated, the Voice Arts Award-winning voice actor Kevin Kilpatrick. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Nick. Glad to be on with you guys. Love talking about gear, and I'm proud to be part of this.
You just have such amazing pipes, and I don't know when you discovered that. I knew you grew up in radio, but you also have a voice that's so familiar. And as I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, that's because I've heard you probably a billion times. You've done Verizon commercials, Apple commercials, Pepsi. You're the enterprise rent-a-car voice on the phone. Like, thank you for
Yeah, that's it. And it's funny, that's the thing I get most recognized for among friends and stuff. They're like, Kev, are you the enterprise voice guy? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, I was so mad waiting on hold. And then I heard you, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to calm down a little bit.
And so you were in radio as a DJ? Were you a DJ in radio?
Yeah. Now here's the thing, Nick, because I always do this with people. I like to call it radio personality because when people hear DJ, they think I'm scratching on the ones and twos, right? That wasn't quite how it was. Thankfully, I was given some liberties, given some freedoms to be more of a personality, and so that's what I like to call it. I started when I was a senior in high school, way back in 1987. And you were kind of saying about the voice and starting to get into the voice. And in this day and age of voiceover, the way my voice sounds is a hindrance in a way for a lot of VO jobs. But getting back to this voice and how it evolved, man, when I was a senior in high school and I dipped my toe into radio, and I'm like, okay, I got to sound like radio DJs of this age. And I have to really try to deepen my voice and get those pipes formed and stuff. So that's kind of how that all evolved.
And so you weren't, as a child growing up, it wasn't like, Mother, I would like some milk for my cereal.
Wasn't. I kind of, seriously, man, I would go down the road in back roads of Arkansas when I got my first radio job, and I'm like practicing KMSL, the country missile, and I'm trying to, really deepen the voice and started smoking cigarettes. No, I didn't start smoking cigarettes. I was joking there. But
I need more
I
rasp.
really practiced. Yeah. I practiced that. But now here we are in the modern era of voiceover, and they want folks that sound like you. They want folks that sound like the next door neighbor. And so I have to fight that at times because I have what they call an announcer sound a lot of times. But I train, I work at it, and I try to get where I'm just talking like this.
Starting out in radio in the 80s, I really want to dive into the first equipment that you were using, especially whenever you broke out of radio and were doing voiceover.
The last 10 years of my radio life were in Miami, and I got my foot in the door of voiceover while I was still doing radio in Miami. And I had some buddies that worked at the radio station with me, and they were like, hey, Kev, I do some voiceovers on the side, and I've got an automotive client that is looking for another voice. Would you like to do it? I was always in the production booth, producing stuff. I've always produced. And I was like, yeah, let's give it a go. And I saw a couple of other radio friends leave and have success doing voiceover. And it started with car spots.
When you started doing voiceover full time, were you using a home studio or were you going into a studio?
It was a mix of both.
Okay.
When I left radio in 2004, I was still going into studios around South Florida and Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. But at that time, it was like the writing was on the wall that this is going to be a job where you do it from home in the future. So I invested in the gear. I, got. So as you can imagine, I was on a budget, right? So let's talk about my gear. I bought a used AT-4033 from a buddy of mine. Man, and I love that mic. I still, as a matter of fact, this gal that I have mentored in the voiceover business, I sold it to her for less than I actually paid for it. And she is still using it to this day.
No way.
So yeah. And it's such a great warm microphone, and it's perfect, for a friendly budget and that kind of thing. So I was using that. I had the DBX 286 because, as you know, in car spots, you hear a lot of these. There's a lot of volume and stuff. And I was doing a lot of concert spots too, by the way. And so I need something to compress the voice. So I had the DB 286 and I was using that. I had a Lynx sound card. Does anybody remember a Lynx sound card? So yeah, I had to install that bad boy into the computer, wire that up, and I'm trying to think. Yeah, that was my interface. So I came out of a Mackie, I think it was the Mackie 1402 VLZ, little mixer, and man, it was just a nice little simple setup. But you talk about budget, Nick. I didn't have any money for Orlex products. So Orlex is the best, right? But you pay a premium for the best stuff. You have to. So this guy got creative, and I went to Walmart, and I got me some mattress toppers. I cut up them mattress toppers, and I cut them up. I actually put them in the bathtub, and I wrapped rubber bands around them, and I tie-dyed them so they would be kind of artistic and stuff. I'm serious. And I did the same thing with these painter's cloths, these like heavy-duty painter cloths. I did the same thing with that, and I had all this tie-dye garbage up all around my room that I was in. And it didn't do anything to isolate the noise, but it dampened the sound, the echo pretty decent. So that was my introductory setup. And at the time, I was editing with Pro Tools at the time. I've pretty much always been a Pro Tools guy.
I'm jealous of your process in getting into this because you learned the technology. You understood, why does this mic sound this way? Oh, I can swap out this preamp, I can put this compressor on it, and you understand the outboard system, I think, a lot more than people either in VO or in music in general, or like, everyone calls himself a producer now if you make a beat, but like producers that make beats and stuff, like you understand this stuff better than I'd say 99% of people because of how you progressed and slowly over time added this piece and now this software makes it easier for me. And are you still on Pro Tools? Because I know on Middle Class VO you were threatening the the move to Audition. I wanted to follow up with that.
So you kind of did a little bit of a deep dive in the podcast. I appreciate that. Much respect. But yeah, so here I strayed. I strayed from Pro Tools for about 6 months or so. Pro Tools model, it's a monthly thing. And I don't even know what Adobe is doing now. But I went to them for, like I said, about 6 months. And man, it's a fine program. It is a fine program for most, and you can produce stuff with it. It's really good at syncing video and stuff like that. But man, I came up with Pro Tools. The biggest thing for me in Pro Tools is, I told you I do automotive a lot. And we all know when you hear a disclaimer in automotive, it's plus tax, tag, title, license, $3.99 doc fee, and all this stuff. You got to say it fast. Pro Tools, to this day, still has the best time compression feature that I've heard in any DAW.
Yeah.
Anywhere, in all of the land. And I went to Adobe, and man, they have a fine time compression, but it just doesn't compare in my ears to what Pro Tools does. So that was, I don't know, that was like 4 or 5 years ago. I went to Adobe. I went to the dark side for a little bit. Don't get me wrong. Adobe is great. And a lot of people love Adobe, especially Windows users, because Pro Tools plays a lot nicer with Mac stuff. So yeah, that was that. And I'm like, okay, I'm back. Reunited, and it feels so good.
Pro Tools has that elastic audio, and I think I think that might be proprietary to Avid. And
I believe so.
You are absolutely right. I mean, even expanding beyond voice into multi-track drums. I mean, they're every now and then you got to fix a warble or something, but for the most part, once you set your anchor points and reduce or expand or so, it's just, you're right. It is. And without losing the clarity, like it sounds like you were talking that fast, like you're an auctioneer or something. It's really, really good. And so I do want to get into your modern microphone setup. Right now, I see you have the you're using your 416, right?
Correct.
And that thing is I mean that's just the industry standard. However, I want to talk about your Manly reference mic. That thing is a beast. And it's like, I feel like it should be, do you store it behind glass in like a shadow box with lights hitting it?
It's funny you should ask. So You want me to break it out real quick?
Yeah, I would love to see it. I want to see somebody holding it. I've never been in a studio that has one.
How I got this is had the AT4033 that we talked about. I wanted to upgrade. And so I started researching. And I don't know if you know the name Joe Cipriano, but he is an OG voiceover guy. And he's kind of like our godfather in a way. Just the coolest, sweetest guy. But he had this article at the time. And he's like, here's my gear setup. I think it was a blog. But he's like, I have a Neumann U87 AI and an Avalon VT737 Pre. And I'm like, I want to be like him. I'm going to put all my saved money into that. So I got the U87 AI. I got the Avalon. The booth that I had built at the time, by the way, I've built like 6 or 7 booths now. I'm in my forever booth, by the way, that somebody else built. And every time I built a booth, I said, I'm not doing this again. I finally got to that point. But that being said, I had my U87 AI. And man, we know the U87, legendary microphone, huge diaphragm, and it picks up every little nuance, crinkle, crack, pop, mouth click, everything. Turns out it was too good for the room that I was in because I'm like, wow, I'm getting a little noise. And my booth that I had custom made myself was not good enough. So I ended up getting the 416. I sold my U87. And then I got the 416. Love the 416. But a lot of people will tell you the 416, it does have some issues you have to work with mic technique, going in post, and getting rid of little sibilants. Like there's some harsh high-end stuff with the 416. And so I thought I was done with my 416 at the time. And I talked with a buddy of mine who was more knowledgeable on gear than I. And he's like, dude, the 416 and the U87 AI had a baby, and it's called the Manly reference. And I'm telling you, it was right because you get the boominess, the depth of the 416, but you get the warmth and some of that brightness of a U87 in this Manly. It is my favorite microphone of all time, even though I use this mostly now. But this one's going to be getting back into the rotation very soon.
So the 416 is your daily driver, if for lack of a better, and the Manly becomes your Ferrari that you take out for, yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
What is your experience with tube microphones versus, normal solid state, even large diaphragm condenser microphones? Is there something that you notice that it does differently than other microphones that you might use?
I learned a long time ago and I had a fellow voice guy and producer. And my producing, by the way, is different than yours, Nick. You produce music, I produce commercials, or I do sound design on different things too. So I just wanted to clarify that so nobody thought, oh, you're producing music. No, I don't mess with that. I can edit music, but anyway. So I had a guy long ago said, trust your ears, man. Just trust your ears. And it took me a long time to get experienced enough to trust my ears. And so that for me is what it is. Like you just said, I don't know the science behind it. I don't know. I just know what I like. And when I tested out the 416, I'm like, oh, that gives me some beefiness. And then, when I had the U87, I don't know what it was about that, but there was a brightness and a warmth to it. And the same thing with my Manly. It was a combination of the both. I don't know the science, though. I can't tell you what it was, but it's just that sound. And I encourage people to trust their ears when they're going through this stuff.
I've heard you discuss that price isn't necessarily pinned to maybe not quality, but appropriateness of the microphone for that voice. Were there microphones like the U87, for instance, that you had? Whenever you go to the 416, was it just like, did you prefer the 416 even though the U87 is worth a lot more?
I did, in that it fit my style of voiceover more because, like I said, doing a lot of automotive stuff. And at the time I was doing a lot of concert spots. I think the U87 AI is great for if you want to narrate audiobooks because, man, that warmth like that is just wonderful. Or if you're doing a lot of national documentaries, I've done a few of those, which, I break out this for that. For my style, which this is, this became the quote unquote trailer and promo microphone. And that's a little bit more in line with the type of voiceover that I do the majority of time. Now, that being said, everybody is using this one. Not literally everybody, but the majority of folks starting out in voiceover, I got to get a 416. You don't have to. You don't have to. You can start out a lot cheaper. Rode makes a great shotgun mic.
Yep.
I have, let's see, I've got an Audio Technica. I'm a fan of Audio Technica stuff, but I've got an Audio Technica shotgun that I'll use for travel sometimes. If I don't want to bring the 416, it's, a little bit less risk of, breaking the budget if you injure a microphone. But I keep that one handy too. But there are a lot of microphones that you can buy that are budget friendly. You don't have to get the 416. There are a lot of options out there nowadays, especially. I see that you're on that. Sure. My first agency. So my radio career, I had like 12 years in radio. And then I went to work for an ad agency for about 7 months in Fort Lauderdale. And when I worked at that studio, that was the booth microphone, was the Shure SM7B. And I loved that. I was like, wow, this is what they're using in, advertising agency studios. And I love that one. There are many options when it comes to getting your first microphone. But I've always said this, I hope it's okay to segue into your room. I think it's so much more important to make sure your room sound is right, because then your microphone can do its job.
Are you referencing more the, the I don't know what the best way to put it, the cardioidness of it, like the directionality? Are you referencing more of the tone of it, like all of the above? Can you expand on that?
Probably the cardioid, because the 416 is hyper-focused. It is, right here. Like, you're not going to hear me so great over here. You're not going to hear me so great over here. If I had my Manley set up, you're still going to catch the majority of that nice. And so those types of microphones, the large diaphragm microphones, will pick up room tone, room noise. If you got an HVAC that kicks on and your room is not right, it's going to pick it up. That's why the 416 is so great, or other comparable shotgun microphones for folks that are starting out and they don't quite have their room just right. I'll take this, and if I travel a fair amount and I'll get into a hotel room, I'll create, Nick, do you know what a pillow fort is?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Okay,
Yep.
so you know what I'm talking about. So we'll set up a pillow fort. That's in a hotel room. That's where you just pile blankets, pillows, and get it all and try to get some sort of space. And then you set this bad boy up in it, and you could get a decent sound.
Yeah.
Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs, and he, big time narrator. He's a former radio guy. But I watched a video of him in his pillow fort, and he had a 416 under the covers, and I'm like, this clown is doing these narrations. He's not a clown, obviously. He's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it just made me chuckle. I'm like, he's doing these, Discovery Channel or whatever network, narrations on the 416 in a pillow fort like we would do at a hotel room.
He's
like
just
we
like
clowns
us.
would do.
Yeah. And then you are in a vocal booth, right? Like a 5x7.
It is vocalbooth.com.
Yeah, they're amazing. Vocal booth, whisper room. There's so many of those kind of. They send you the pieces, right? I haven't bought one, but I think I understand how it works.
It was a great experience. So I did, like I said, I built 6 or 7 booths or sound rooms along the way. And again, every time I said, I'm not doing this again, never. And I finally got to that point where I'm like, I'm going to get my forever booth. But yeah, it's modular. These walls, this is a window right here in the booth, but it's all actually lined up to the outside of my house, in my loft here where I've got the studio set up.
That's great.
But man, yeah, and part of this, thank you. Part of it was, I read their specs. And I read all the noise reduction and all the tests they did. And to me, this was among the best for the budget I wanted to spend. And I like to brag and go, I got the same model that Lady Gaga has on her bus. I've got the same version Mariah Carey has somewhere, Donny Osmond has this one. So it's like, that's some bragging points. But yeah, a big fan of this. And this is my forever booth. It came on a flatbed truck. And the walls are in panels that I put together, and they are heavy. Man, they are heavy duty. But it came with a ventilation system as well. Let me see if I can kind of... So
That's great. Did you get to pick the color sequence too?
Yeah, I picked that. That was all part of it, and got some upgrades. Like the window was an upgrade, but they have many different models, and many companies do. And this is all the good Orlex stuff in here. But yeah, I love it. They shipped it to me at the time. I was working in a studio in an office space that I rented, but in 2020. I got a new house and I had room to bring the studio back home at that time. So I've moved it. So it's a pain. It's a pain because of the heft. You know, this is double walled stuff and it's heavy. But yeah, it's modular. You can break it down, and that's why it's my forever booth. I can take it wherever I go.
That's so great. Can you give me an example of, like, in one of your 7 iterations of a booth, when you said, I'm never doing this again, what was the squirrel that ran by that you were like, all right, I need to do this again? Or was it all kind of necessity for moving? And
moving was part of it. Budget too, man. It's like I can go to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever and get the hardware, get the drywall, and do it on my own and save some money. But you know, I'm okay. I'm decent, handy wise. But it was every time I was like, Kevin, you told yourself that you've invested this money in materials and your time, and it's still not as good as what the pros put together. And that's what it was. But it was like every time I did build it better. So there's that.
yeah.
But then I finally was like, I moved about 100 miles from my old house. I was in a house in southern Tennessee, and I moved up to the Nashville area. And when I did that, I'm like, done. Now's the time.
Yeah. Are there any applications in your voiceover career, specifically with what you do, that you do want a little bit of room, or is it always dead as possible?
Now, when I was designing this, I've got absorption everywhere in this room, as you can see, except my window. And that was by design because I wanted some life, just a little bit of reflection, because if I had nothing but foam in here, top to bottom, it's just not a good sound. You hear it sucking the life out of your VOs.
Yeah.
And I learned that, over the years by talking to folks and stuff like that. So that was by design. My roof is a little bit flat. You can kind of see.
How dead is good? If that was like a caveman sentence.
Right. How good the deadness.
The dead needs good.
I definitely want some life and just a hint of reflection in the room. For the most part, though, I do want it dead, but just a tiny bit of life. And I think I've got that. And when I use my Manley, it sounds great in here. And my 416 obviously is going to be, gangbusters in here too.
How do you test to get it? Do you do like snaps? What are you listening for to get that perfect amount of liveliness?
So you're reminding me of when I travel and I go to a hotel room or an Airbnb, and my wife is like, "What are you doing?" "I'm checking reflection, babe." I'm all those things. And she's like, "You're a clown." And I'm like, "I'm just doing my job." But thankfully I don't have to, when I get here, I don't have to do anything. When I've helped people with sound, that's what I'll do, and I always encourage them, get rid of the reflection. You get yourself a room inside of a room if you can. These are for folks starting out. You buy decent gear. I tell people a closet full of clothes is a fine recording environment if you're just starting out before you have the money to invest and upgrade. But conversely, I also encourage people, always reinvest in yourself. Invest in yourself. Keep upgrading that stuff. You got to work on your performance, but you got to make sure your gear is competitive with everybody else, because all this stuff adds up to voiceover. And Nick, you do voiceover stuff, so you get this. You need every little advantage.
Yeah.
Invest in yourself whenever you can. And don't be afraid to hit up fullcompass.com. I love the idea of when you reach certain levels of success, or, hey, I just got a good national job. It's time to get that 416. Or it's time to get that new Apollo, or whatever you want to do. So that's kind of what I do. It's been like tiers of success. All along the way. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself. Don't be cheap. And, don't be afraid to hit up our friends at fullcompass.com.
Absolutely. I was just looking through like all of the things we've been talking about Full Compass has. Go to fullcompass.com. This was just so entertaining for me, Kevin. I learned so much.
Had a blast, Nick. Let's do this again.